Hello and welcome to Live at Epiphan. My name is Matt, and joining us today we have George Herbert, and a little bit later on we have Nick Milani will be joining us for another little segment. Today we've got a lot of great stuff that we're going to be talking about today. If you're just joining us, welcome, welcome. This is your first time here on the show. We do these typically every 2 weeks or every couple of weeks. Please feel free to say hi in the chat. It's always nice to hear from you guys. And so maybe George, how are you today?
Oh, I am doing great. I forgot to open the YouTube chat, so I'm just working on that right now
Perfect.
in the background. But that's because it's so easy to do this. Multi-monitor, people, multi-monitor. That's key. But I'm doing great, Matt. This is you. It's been a while since you've been on the show, so I'm glad to have you here co-hosting. It's excellent, and I'm playing with some fun kit that I'm going to dive into later.
Mhm.
Because yeah, I don't. People may not tell if I can look a bit different than usual, but we'll dive into why that might be later on. But Matt, I know you were looking at a whole bunch of fun news elements. Like basically, you and I were chatting the other day, and we both kind of just were going, "Hey, man, what did you learn this week?" Like I learned this thing, and that's kind of how we came up with what we wanted to talk about on the show today.
Right. And in fact, a lot of the of my research has really been kind of been around streaming and the way that social media platforms are really starting to change and evolve and look at new avenues of either generating income or just finding more engaging ways of increasing their audiences. Probably the biggest news that I read over the last little while, excluding some of the ones we'll talk about in just a little bit, is kind of how TikTok is kind of taking a new approach to things. So imagine this. If you guys are active TikTok users, you spend all day working or
Nope.
studying or doing whatever you need to do. You get home, you just want to unwind with a little bit of TikTok, maybe scroll through a couple different posts, some funny, some informative ones. But there's a new approach where they're talking about turning TikTok maybe into kind of a live streaming shopping channel, right? So you think about the shopping channels on you have on cable TV, and granted, most of you guys are probably a little bit unplugged, so you're probably not totally up there with everything else. But imagine this 24-hour possibly streaming service that will have people the likes of influencers and social media moguls of like maybe Oprah Winfrey or Khloe Kardashian that are promoting products, solutions, services that will really ultimately generate income from TikTok users. And it doesn't go without saying either. I mean, there's been a lot of research to go into this where they'll talk about things like live streaming being able to increase sales, right? It drives shopping upwards of almost 2%, or at least, one and a half times, 150%, depending on what you're doing. But some of that might also stem from the fact that Gen Z today is using TikTok a lot more than other platforms and even search engines like Google. So we talk about why people might want to look at TikTok. Some of them are looking for tutorials, some of them are looking at product releases and announcements. But ultimately, if you can engage your audiences in a live streaming platform that does all of the legwork and the research for you, it ends up being something far more interesting for them, maybe lucrative. But that also comes with its own, potential caveats. If you're just looking at having your funny or your serious or your informative content, it's possible that as you're swiping through, you'll be coming across these live streams a lot more, which understandably could be a little bit frustrating. Now,
So Matt, what you're telling me here is they're turning Instagram because
kind of.
that's literally what Instagram has become is an e-commerce platform, and so TikTok's going to follow suit. At least that seems to be their objective.
Yeah.
Only in this case, brought to you by the Chinese government instead of Facebook.
I mean, you're definitely not wrong, but it also drives a really interesting opportunity for content creators and businesses alike to start advertising some of their products and services out there as well. So if you're looking to engage your audiences in more ways than simple marketing or how to or helpful fun videos like we're kind of doing today, it's an opportunity on TikTok to start driving some of that change and some of those needs. So that's TikTok. I'm going to pivot to something else for a second. And George, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this as well. You've decided you're abandoning the little screen that you have that you hold in your hand or with your tablet, and you're moving to something like putting on a set of goggles and jumping into VR, right? Well, a lot of the talk out there is really kind of metaverse. And there's a lot of different articles out there that really kind of talk about how there's no one really on metaverse. They're talking about how any given time you might see between 4 and 16 active users. So why the metaverse? It's an interesting question. And George, I believe that you actually were the one that kind of introduced me to a little bit more of the video content here on there as well.
Mhm.
And you talked a little bit about how maybe there's not much in the way of active users right now, but there's also a huge opportunity in the world of advertisement. Is that correct?
Yeah, and actually, I'll give credit where, I mean, I think a lot of us, especially those who tend to be fairly cynical about these things, already knew this. But our Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, one of the largest YouTubers in the world, had an excellent video about Meta and the
Mm-hmm.
metaverse. And I think it came out of him going and testing the new VR setup that they just released. That those reviews went out like crazy this week. But he points out, and just kind of coming back to your TikTok points as well, the whole point of all these platforms is advertising, right? Like let's break it down. Let's be serious. Google is an advertising platform. Facebook is an advertising platform. Instagram is an advertising platform. TikTok will be an advertising platform. And ultimately, guys like Mark Zuckerberg are throwing tens of billions of dollars into things like the metaverse because they want to be there at the ground floor when they can advertise in the metaverse. That's what it's all about. I mean, it's really simple. It all just comes down to dollars, right? So, and his long play
Mm-hmm.
is that maybe no one's using it today, but he has this vision that someday many of us will spend hours and hours a day in VR or AR or a mix of both, and being able to have product placement and advertising. And so think about, there was a time when there were no product placements in Hollywood
It's
movies.
true.
Now, every single thing you see in a Hollywood movie almost is a product placement, whether it's a can of Coca-Cola, a General Motors car, it's all paid advertising. If you can't see a brand because they've wiped it out, it's because that brand didn't pay. If you can see a brand, it's because they paid. The same thing's happening across the internet, right? So I think it's wonderful to think about this magical world of Wall-E where we all float around in chairs and have VR headsets on. But the reality is the money is being spent to advertise.
Right.
And the video from MKBHD is excellent. He always makes great content, but he hits it on the head in terms of what highlighting all these things. And what happens when it is miniaturized down to the point where it fits in the frame of my glasses here, and my Ray-Bans can give me AR, and I'm going to get little ads in every corner of my vision.
If you guys aren't familiar with AR, AR is augmented reality. So basically superimposing
Yes.
digital world into the real world around you.
And I'm going to be honest, AR is far more interesting to me than VR because VR makes me sick.
Oh, I agree.
So,
So we'll look at it like this. So Instagram is really kind of the e-commerce platform. Twitter is, or sorry, not Twitter. TikTok is slowly becoming the shopping channel, or at least that's its vision or its aim, because it had huge successes in places like in China. And Metaverse is going to basically be the advertising billboard capital of the digital world, or Internet 2.0.
yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
So let's talk about the last social media sharing platform that I can think of, and that really comes down to the new Twitter CEO, Elon Musk. Right now he's kind of in this back and forth conversation and debate with Stephen King regarding what they want to charge for the official checkmark that they have. Originally he posted something like, well, we're going to do $20, and then now it's down to $8, and then there's an argument that
tomorrow it's going to be 50 cents. Like come on. It's funny, from another conversation we had with our colleague Marta the other day. We had this big, huge, high-level conversation about a bunch of things, and at the end of it, it all boiled down to us all agreeing the world is a dumpster fire. I think we were all particularly cynical that day.
true.
But I think that's quite quite accurate for Twitter right now. You have Elon Musk changing rules on the fly. He's just obviously gone through this acquisition, $44 billion, a crazy amount of money. It's anticipated that he could lay off as much as 50% of their workforce tomorrow. He's talking about creating a video platform that's pay-per-view as part of Twitter. He's talking about reviving Vine to compete with TikTok.
And that's fantastic.
So it's all over the show.
It's
all over the show.
The Vine part, story time, is kind of near and dear to the millennial side in me, and that's just because it was this fantastic 5 to 10 second video platform back in the day. Had a lot of really hilarious content. For those of you out there, if you're Gen Z that's watching our show today, I highly recommend at least going to look at a compilation on YouTube, maybe best of Vines in 2010 or 2012, just to date that a little bit, and you'll find some really amazing content there. But this also actually raises another
Well,
question.
let's be blunt, Matt. No Vine, no TikTok.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, so that it's that simple.
It's a great competition piece against TikTok, and hopefully, not funded by the Chinese government at that point either. But
no, just funded by Elon Musk.
yeah, exactly. But circling back actually a little bit to Elon looking to charge for things like check marks or having pay-per-view clicks, that also raises a small concern, at least for me, that also could mean that he's going to be charging for live streaming on the platform at some point as well, which could be a little bit more of a concern or a challenge, for some of you out there and content creators and businesses alike that want to be able to share their knowledge and their content and their products and services. So where Elon will take it next, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting to me because I'm not a regular Twitter user. For me, the number one advantage of Twitter through its history has been the idea of the citizen journalist on Twitter.
Yes.
And so if some of this stuff starts getting paywalled, you start to remove that. You start to take away that democratization of video. And I don't love that. That's not my favorite thing. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I think when you have Elon Musk now at the helm, anything and everything is possible. It's very likely that Twitter will just have its own satellites next year. So,
that could also definitely be a thing. Yeah. So that's kind of where my learning and my research has really been over the last, week or two. Be looking at Instagram, looking at TikTok, looking at the Metaverse, looking at Twitter, talking about Vine. But it all comes back to wanting to be able to stream that content. But it's all dependent on what sort of access to those platforms that we actually have. But what about, how are we supposed to capture that content? So what about you, George? What have you learned over the last couple of weeks?
Mine has been a little bit more physical, a little bit more hands-on, but in a few different ways. The first one being we were lucky enough through some friends at Canon Canada to borrow some of Canon's new PTZ cameras, namely the N300 and the N500. You are viewing me right now on the N300. I literally walked into the studio today, threw it on the tripod, and turned it on. And that's all I did. I didn't try to adjust anything. I just stepped in front of it and we started shooting the show.
And that's the smaller one, right?
That's the smaller one. And I have to say that I'm actually really impressed with the visual out of it, considering I have not adjusted anything. I zoomed it a little and I panned and tilted it a little because it is a PTZ camera, but I didn't play with any autofocus or white balance or any of those things. It just right out of the box looked pretty darn good. Now, the N300 is a small one. It's going to be kind of more of a form factor that people are more familiar with. And I'm just going to share my screen here for a second so that people can kind of see a little bit of information about what we're talking about. So this is the N300. Pretty standard looking PTZ camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty, you can hang it upside down. You can do that whole thing. It's great. Now, these aren't, as you can see here, this is Canon USA's website. So these are American dollars.
Right.
They're not inexpensive, but they're not unreasonable. The advantage here is that these things have some big sensors, and the N300 is the smaller of their sensors. It'll do 4K 30. It'll do full HD 60.
Right.
I think the big advantage is here's the Canon's building in their amazing autofocus from their DSLRs. So their phase detection, autofocus, and all that stuff. And that's been fantastic. I found the motor is really quiet. Like I've used some PTZ cameras, you can hear that whine and the grinding of the gears. It's so smooth, which has been nice. The other one, which is sitting beside me here, is the N500, or as it very quickly got referred to around the office, the Chonky Boy. Because this thing is no joke. This guy is big, as you can see here. The base is like twice the size of the N300. the lens and everything is huge. There's good reason for that. The N500 is using a full 1-inch sensor.
That's massive.
This thing is huge. So, in theory, its low light performance is just night and day ahead of some of the competition there. The other thing I like about it is when you kind of go around and you look at the back of this and actually have a better close-up of this, they're doing some things that other manufacturers aren't. And on the N500, you'll notice it has XLR audio inputs.
I'm in love.
Like, Matt, you're the pro audio
I
guy.
am.
When have you seen XLR on a PTZ camera?
I'll be honest, I don't think that I've ever seen XLR on a PTZ camera, but I want it.
And usually when we talk to customers, when they say, can I run audio through a PTZ camera? We go, you can, but because it's usually like 3.5 mil consumer grade kind of crap. This is professional audio on a PTZ, on a professional grade PTZ camera. So I love that. Of course, SDI out, HDMI out. Also, Canon recently released a firmware update for both of these cameras that adds SRT outputs now. So they can do NDI, which, by the way, is built into that price. So when you look at that pricing for the N500 or the N300, there is no additional cost for an NDI license like many of the competitors do. It's built into that price. So out of the box, NDI is there, no additional licensing. I think that's really cool. I love that personally. And then SRT, they added that. That's something I talked to Canon about 8 months ago, and they finally added it. And that's one of the big reasons I asked them to borrow the cameras, is that we wanted to test that with our Pearl products and Unify in the cloud. Because as a lot of people know, we're pretty big on SRT around here. So Jeremy's producing the show remotely from Jordan. Once again, thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy's actually pulling SRT from the N500 right now and kind of bringing that in.
Oh, come on.
So,
you could have given a
he can
better
pull that
view
up.
of that.
Well, it's kind of tricky because well, give me a second here.
Okay.
Let me go into the handy software and just have it point at me. Hi.
Hello.
So there's actually some. I'm actually really impressed. I literally only installed the Canon software, control software, right before the show. I'm trying to decide which camera to look at. These have built-in tally lights, by the way. And I'm actually really impressed with the software. This software is crazy powerful. There are so many adjustments. So the camera nerds, the really hardcore camera nerds who might buy a Canon DSLR because of all the little knobs and widgets they can turn, these have that. You want to play with the white balance, the aperture, the gamma, all that weird stuff. It's all there.
Nice.
It's all there in the software. Very easy to access and understand. The presets are all there, so I can do, go to its home setting, go to the presets I've created. It's all there. And those presets can include those camera settings or positioning or both. So I'm impressed. I like it. I think it's cool. Of course, you can use the joystick controllers and all that stuff, which
comes with a remote.
I find less interesting.
Right?
Yeah, it comes with a remote. Pretty standard, pretty standard remote. Nothing too fancy there. And it's that's like any other remote, although it's a little smaller than many of them, which is kind of nice. But I gotta say, I'm impressed. I think they're cool. I think the fact that you're getting a camera, especially in the N500, right? This is absolutely priced in line with Sony or a Panasonic. So what you're getting at the same price as a Sony or a Panasonic is something that has NDI and SRT built into it with XLR audio, a massive 1-inch sensor. Like, this is a really professional grade camera. So I'm impressed. I like them, and we're going to continue to play with them. We know SRT can go into Unify directly. We know that they can go into Pearls directly over SRT and NDI and HDMI and SDI. So, if you're out there looking for a PTZ camera, this isn't sponsored or officially endorsed it necessarily, but, definitely I would say take a look at what Canon has to offer. They're a little newer to the PTZ space, but I think they're coming out swinging.
I mean, it seems like a phenomenal camera. And I actually be interested to know what some of you guys out there would probably use a camera like this for. Is it mainly for capturing something that's outdoors, indoors? Is it, at the back end of a ceremonies hall or a stadium? I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
where could you see yourself using that?
yeah. I mean, these things with 4K and these big sensors, I think it could be adapted to be used pretty much anywhere. I think they're really impressive. 20x, 15x optical zoom, 20x digital, right? Like that
That's massive.
got a lot of flexibility there. So you could use it. These are not obviously waterproofed versions, but outdoors in a big space, I would say, especially in a big space, right? That big 4K sensor means you could crop that down and not lose any fidelity,
Yep.
right? So you could use it in the back of a really large hall. So I think they'd be great for that, churches, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think they're cool. The other thing I've been doing, which is kind of hands-on, virtually hands-on, is I've been joining and participating partners and other people's content using Epiphan Connect, which is how we're doing this show as well. And we got a lot of stuff about Connect. We're going to bring Nick in a second and talk more about the things he's been doing with Connect this week, because it's way better than what I've been doing. But what I was doing is I was getting to experience delivering on the promise that we set out to, which was Connect being universal to work with any SRT workflow. And that's exactly what I've been experiencing as a participant, not as a technical guy, but hey, I'm joining this other person's production and they're using a TriCaster and we're using Connect, flawless. And their producers love it. These are like the hardcore guys who love all the T-bars and the buttons and the switches, and that's why they bought a TriCaster. And they're going, dude, bringing people in over Connect this way, insane. It's so good. It's so easy. And that's exactly what we aimed to do. So I got that experience, which was fantastic, because it's one thing when we do it with Pearl and with Unify and all that stuff. Like, that's one thing. But to actually see the real world applications we were aiming for, hands-on is awesome. And I love it. So I think with that, because it's a great segue into what Nick's going to share with us. We're going to bring Nick in. Nick, what were you playing with this past week, 2 weeks? Because it's even beyond what I just talked about.
Yeah, well, it's been exciting, since we launched the product, and it was just fun to use the product, right? I think demonstrated excellence is one of those areas that's just underappreciated in today's vaporware world of $60 million investments in companies that produce nothing. So it's been a lot of fun to go out there and evangelize and really represent the hard work that everybody at Epiphan's been doing. And it's a fun seat that I get to sit on. You mentioned Microsoft Ignite. It's been a few weeks since we were there, but it was an incredible event to see. I'd love to just share a few scenes for those that weren't able to attend, because I got to tell you, I've had the good fortune of being to a lot of Microsoft events over the years. I've certainly been at my fair share of virtual, in person, and they spared no expense on this event. It was quite incredible what they put together. The visual experience in person, using the Microsoft 4 core colors to create these different zones in the convention center as attendees walked in. These pillars were actually real digital signage. So they were able to, change dynamically as people were getting on stage. Excuse
really
me.
Cool.
So you start to go through this. One of the things, horrible selfie picture as I walked into the convention center. But what I'd love to point out here is, I'm joining from outside of Seattle and I'm new to the areas, which means I can't get anywhere in an effective amount of time. And with young kids, I'm always late. I was able to flip the phone on in the car, throw the headset on, listen to the keynote as I parked, walked into the space. Here's me actually transitioning from kind of the live event or the on-demand event to the actual live event in the room. And I think there's a promise there about accessibility and meeting people wherever they are. Frankly, I think it's stupid that we even debate whether events should be hybrid. Everything should be hybrid. Everyone should be able to access content wherever they are. So that was pretty fascinating to see. The production quality, they brought in a remote presenter from Mercedes via screen as they physically kind of moved around the space, which was super cool. Mm-hmm. This gal gave, which was a riveting demonstration for the far end folks, kind of an awkward demonstration for the people in person. She's talking to a wall basically. But if you look closely up on the monitors up here, you'll see that for the folks in the room, they brought that outside feed in to give a sense of what was going on, which was pretty cool. They had different pod sections that were broken out where people were doing presentations. It was packed. That energy was a lot of fun to be a part of. Accessibility conversations that I thought were really interesting. A little awkward in this one that it was a presentation about accessibility, but they didn't have amplification, so I couldn't hear what the woman was saying as she was talking about the importance of people hearing what you're saying.
Ouch.
And then
someone needed live script.
Exactly. Speaking of accessibility, by the way, one of the really cool pieces of news that didn't get as much air as I would have loved it for, Microsoft announced an entirely new line of Surface peripherals that are designed for accessibility and to accommodate people with disabilities. And what's really cool is they're showing these base components and then the ability to 3D print additional devices that go over it. So if you're using a Surface Pen, but you have maybe a grip strength issue, which is a pretty common problem people have, you could 3D print a ball that allows you then to use it if maybe you're missing digits or you have restrictions there, which I just celebrate when a company their size starts to do stuff like this, right? I mean, unfortunately, those folks oftentimes are forgotten in the tech world. One of the things that I wanted to highlight beyond the happy hours and everything else was what I called the gap. And what's the gap? Well, the gap was the space between between kind of that professional broadcast and those side spaces. And this is something that I want to continue to highlight and talk about throughout the upcoming sessions and discussions that we do, because it was really impressive to see it in kind of action there. And the idea was the gap between kind of those high-end full production spaces, right? So the first area that we saw where you're seeing everybody, there are 15 people assigned to this space, everyone's, producing and moving and doing all this work versus, so this is that first space where I talked about everyone's kind of in there, there was 15 cameras on that main stage. You talk about that versus the idea of a team session, a video conferencing session. A big difference here. The folks on the far end are just kind of arrayed in a tile. It was hard for them to engage. It was hard for people to see the content. And I think fundamentally what we're trying to do is bridge that gap, right? And trying to work between those two spaces. It was as we continued to work on this, and we had the great pleasure to also travel up to Microsoft Canada in Toronto last week. And we tried to bridge that gap for them. And I'll share just a little bit of a teaser of things to come here. This is a representation of what we were able to use using Epiphan Connect, Epiphan Unify, and Microsoft Teams. No encoders, no hardware, just the ability to really come in here and see exactly what folks were able to deliver. And, it just gives you a little sense, kind of these cut downs, and forgive the low res here as I'm sniffing off of LinkedIn. But, we were able to really create this dynamic presentation for people that were both physically there and remote. And it was really energizing for everybody, and really cool to see Harp give us a shout out and really talk about the impact it had on his team and the impact it can have on the marketplace.
Very, very cool.
I see some really awesome friendly faces in that reel there too, Nick, with obviously Brody from Microsoft, but our friend Leroy Chow, our own Michael Schultz. So I just again, having those kind of people in the same virtual room is, you could sell some pretty hefty price tickets to get into that space, I think, just to hear those people talk.
Well, that's part of the idea, right? We want to extend the reach of this content. We want to make sure that everyone can participate and see that. And, Dr. Chow, for those of you that don't know, he's an astronaut. He was one of the first extended space astronauts. He's been engaged with Epiphan from the very earliest days. And to hear his story, for him to be able to join from Houston, but be able to provide this kind of rich content for folks spread all over the country, It was a really cool thing. And, I had the good fortune of presenting from an MTR adjacent to the room and then walking into the room after the event and kind of feeling that buzz, which was a lot of fun. So this is, again, kind of that idea of broadcast without barriers that we like to talk about.
Yeah.
Other big news this week, where we're bridging the gap between production and video conferencing, is some news with Grass Valley. Epiphan's officially part of the Grass Valley AMP ecosystem. This is connecting together, hundreds of different manufacturers and service to creating better broadcasts and outcomes. And frankly, now, if you're a Grass Valley, user, if you use any devices that connect into AMP, you can bring the power of Microsoft Teams into those productions, just like we're doing today, just like we're demonstrating.
That's
phenomenal.
I
think it's a pretty simple proposition. A lot of organizations have invested in that production capability. They've invested in Grass Valley, and they've invested in Microsoft Teams. But those two worlds were very difficult to get to merge in the past. Anybody that's ever had to produce a live event and try to bring in video conferencing participants knows the hell of a pinup farm, as opposed to the ease and simplicity of cloud-based. And I'll just come down here for one key point that I love that we're expressing here. Matt, sorry to put you back on stage. Are you wearing the exact same outfit today?
I am not.
Okay, just checking. Good. But the power of this thing is the ability to get a higher resolution extraction at the cloud than you can get from a pinup farm or from NDI. And this is a big debate we've heard a lot. Well, what about my NDI workflows? We love NDI. We support NDI. It's a very powerful tool for acquiring local signals. Getting Microsoft Teams into a production is much more, it's a much higher quality with SRT and with Epiphan Connect. And so you can kind of see that on display here. So any of you out there that have an SRT capable of workflow, if you're working with Grass Valley, really exciting time and opportunity for you to be able to bring that into your production and be able to use that moving forward.
And that's absolutely phenomenal. And Nick, thank you so much for talking about all of this. We do really appreciate it. And for those of you guys that are interested out there, we're going to show you a little bit more of the behind the scenes stuff with Connect in just a few moments there.
Yeah. I think, Nick, you had one last thing. And some people may have already seen this, but I know you've been having conversations, and the traction that this story has gotten has been tremendous. I love the video that we got out of this because I think it's one of the best videos we've ever shot, which I love, and obviously full credit to the team. But that's this success story out of NC State using pearls for lecture capture.
Yeah, I want to keep singing this song because I think part of the challenge we have, and the folks that are watching the show, by the way, we collectively have, is that all of us are out on the very edge of what video production can do for an organization. And this story talks about engaging students, about really leveraging the technology to improve outcomes. And so I just thought, what a powerful tool to continue to share with people, continue to advocate and evangelize, because it is a great space. And, again, a story about accessibility, whether you're in the classroom or you're not in the classroom, we should have great content, we should be engaged, and we should be learning. So kudos to the team for producing this, and the folks at NC State for doing such a great job to push the boundaries, because it's not easy to push the boundaries of what video is.
Well, and I heard that at a conference not long after this story went out, they were speaking, and some of our team was there as well, and it was a packed room, and every other speaker was a ghost town practically, right? So, I mean, again, it speaks to the power of true success with some of these things, and that's fantastic, and obviously point of pride for us here at Epiphan, but we could put that feather in the cap and feel good about it. But ultimately, like you said, Nick, it's about taking down those barriers ultimately.
That's exactly it. And one of the things too that I just love about our approach is that we're not talking about the product. We're talking about the experiences we create on the behalf of our customers. And George, you've been at the pointy end of the spear on that for a decade now, and I just really celebrate that your team's always out there working hard. For those of you that don't realize, George oversees our customer success team, and they're just an incredible asset. If you're trying to make this journey, if you're trying to push those boundaries to do more with video, engage with our YouTube channel, go talk to George's teams. We're here to help. And when you start doing cool stuff, we'd love to celebrate you as a case study as well, because the art of possibility is so important in this space.
That's awesome. Thank you, Nick. We will let you go because I know you're a busy man. But before we run away, Matt and I do want to share one last thing, and that is usually the inevitable question that comes out of this. And so last week, Matt and I did a webinar together all about Epiphan Connect. And of course, we've talked about Connect a bunch already.
No.
But one of the things that the number one comment we got back, Matt, and I'm sure you saw these all over the place, social media posts and things like that, were people going, okay, I watched the webinar, but like, can you show me the behind the scenes one more time? Because they're pretty sure they get it, but it almost seems too easy, I think. So it almost seems so easy, it's unbelievable. So Matt, give us the 5-minute rundown of what are we doing with Connect to produce this show right now, where the 4 people involved, yourself, me, Nick, and our producer Jeremy, none of us are in the same geographic location.
No, not at all.
No one is in the same building, barely even the same countries in some cases. So give us the rundown.
So Epiphan Connect is essentially a platform service that basically allows you to extract those SRT sources or those participants or the screen share from your Microsoft Teams meeting into your production tool. And we're completely agnostic as the type of tool you want to use. We're using Pearls and Unify to run our productions here at Epiphan, but you could also just as well use software like vMix or OBS to run that tool, or even other cloud-based services, or using Grass Valley as that production hub for your experience. To get into Connect is pretty straightforward. You can create a free Epiphan Cloud account and subscribe to the services of Connect. On this page here, we have our ongoing participants for this particular meeting. Now, if I go into Epiphan Connect as a whole, this is the main kind of dashboard of Epiphan Connect. The easiest thing to do is to go into your Microsoft Teams meeting that you can have, or a Teams style room, copy the participant links and say connect it to a meeting. From there, you can paste in that link, decide if you want to have the entire room audio selected, which is also known as mixed audio, or isolated audio, so that each individual participant will have their own audio feed. Click connect and join, and this will start a progress bar that will take somewhere in the ballpark between 2 and 5 minutes to spin up. Once Connect has actually spun up completely, you can then click on the meeting itself, and you'll be able to see all of the participants that are in this particular meeting, and as well as have a general mainstream and a screen sharing option. So as you can see here at the bottom, I'm actually screen sharing what we're doing here today. Within Connect itself, you can also get great information. So if I wanted to pull Jeremy, our producer, into the show, don't worry, Jeremy, I'm not going to ask you to be on screen here. I can click on the start button, and it will give me more details and information to kind of get my stream up and going. By default, Connect is set as a listener, which makes it really easy to simply just copy the link that you have, bring that into your production tool, software, or hardware device, paste that SRT link, and you're immediately going to be able to start extracting that source. You can pick the quality settings that you want. If you want, full HD or HD, if you want 30 frames per second, maybe you only want 25 frames per second or 10 frames per second. Adjust the bitrate if you need to do that in your audio settings, and then press start. From there, you're automatically sending that streamed SRT content as an isolated source with your audio to your production destination. Now, probably the most important thing here, and George, you touched on this in the webinar as well, is when we talk about things like caller and listener, this isn't referring to the flow of data or information. It's simply about how things get connected, like the handshake between the two ends. If we're looking at all of our content, we're extracting these SRT sources. You can also gain insight and information to see what sort of quality settings you have to work with. One of the beautiful things about SRT as well is it's really adaptive. It's really good at stabilizing video and audio. So if you're in an environment where you have less than ideal network for upload or download speeds, SRT is going to do what it can to try and balance out and stabilize that signal. There's also some additional things that you can do as well, like adding additional buffer, so that at the end of the day, all of your participants are arriving to your production house at the same time, but maybe the streams are coming a little bit later than what your target audiences are going to see. And that's totally fine. Now, I'm going to try to do a little bit of a meta share here for a second. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and go and share in our Epiphan Microsoft Teams meeting. So in the Teams meeting itself, you basically have all of your participants, and Connect basically just joins as a participant, just quietly sits in the background. The beautiful part about
You have
Connect
to share
being
full
in
screen for them to see it.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I will try and share a full screen here. This is going to be, and I apologize because I have an ultra wide monitor, so this is going to get really weird. But apparently it's not sharing that anyways, so okay. It kind of popped
Yeah,
up
we'll
and
see if we can
disappeared.
do it.
Uh,
Oh, you're having some weird screen sharing
Technology,
fun.
it is convenient, but it is certainly not perfect. I don't know if someone has the ability to maybe George, you have the ability to share the Microsoft Team, but yeah, there we go.
Got the window
So yeah,
inside the
so
window.
Yeah, we're getting the infinity window, which is always good fun with Nick pulling up that share. Now, the fun part is the Teams at least you actually allows you to share its own application. Zoom doesn't let you do that. So we can even show the behind the scenes here a bit better. Jeremy, for fun, you could even switch over to what my B cam is doing alongside this, because you can see on camera as well, not just in a screen share, what I'm looking at as a confidence monitor. Um, and this is maybe not the best view either, but this is what I'm looking at. I'm just sitting here at a desk, and I happen to point this camera at this display, which shows Teams. One of the things you'll notice here that we're kind of sneaky TZ preview here, you'll see that there's actually a little bit of a feedback here. And that's something we're working on. I think more information to come on that. But the beauty of it, again, what Matt was trying to highlight here is that for us as participants, all we have to do is just join a Teams meeting, right? Like there's nothing else to it. It's that simple, and that makes that makes a big difference. Here, I can even adjust this exposure on the fly here on this camera so we can see that monitor better.
That looks
'Cause I
great.
have that software. Uh, but so, I mean, again, participant wise, and this comes back to one of the things I was talking about. It's so easy to just join a production because it doesn't feel like a production. I just joined a Teams meeting and boom, there it is. Like it's that simple from that participant perspective, and that's the interaction. The producer gets to do all that hard work on the back end that Matt was showing, which is a wonderful way to do that from anywhere. So yeah, Matt, I mean, that's kind of the high level. So, thank you for that. I threw into chat there. If anyone wants to try out Connect for themselves, like Matt said, sign up for Epiphan Cloud. I threw a promo code into chat. If you want to use that, you can get some free hours to play with Connect and learn it for yourself and see how it can save your productions and really unlock the possibilities, those hybrid possibilities Nick was talking about that we all need. Like I said, every conference should be hybrid. So these are the tools that can make that happen. And we're really excited to bring that out. And our producer Jeremy, he might be in Jordan, but every time it seems like everything I see him share on social media is how these tools are making his life so much easier as a producer to put things together, from around the world, and that's proof.
Absolutely. I think.
So that's great. If anyone has any questions, throw them into chat. But otherwise, this is one of the longest shows we've done in a long time, Matt. So I think we are going to wrap it up there. But it was fantastic to have you back on the show.
That's great.
It's always great to have Nick on the show as well. And as we get towards the end of the year, I'm sure we will have more opportunities to get both of you on the show to chat about cool stuff. It's crazy to think it's November already.
Oh, the time flies.
But that's what it is. So our friend Snoka just asked in chat, is there any link between Epiphan Pearl products and Connect? And I mean, yes,
Absolutely.
because Pearl can ingest SRT, Connect is outputting SRT. You can do exactly what we're doing for the production here. We might be using Unify today, but you could use a Pearl too to do the exact same thing that we're doing right now. You don't have to use Unify in the cloud. You could do this on a physical Pearl. I mentioned that I joined a production that was doing something similar with a TriCaster. That's the beauty of Connect, is that anything that supports SRT, including Pearls, is your production platform, if that's your choice. And Sonoga, I know you're a Pearl user. Absolutely, no problem. But that is one of the big questions we often get. But we also want to emphasize that you don't have to use a Pearl, because that's the big value.
Software, cloud
makes
tools.
it portable too.
You got it.
Exactly. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. Let's wrap it up there. Really, really appreciate everyone's time today. This has been a fun show. There's lots of little pieces in here, which is great. I'm just trying to find my notes here. I lost all my notes.
Notes.
Anything is anymore.
Everything is on the fly.
I know.
Nick, you had a really nice hat on too. That was good.
I was trying to show that this thing was real, that I was actually in the background of that display,
You're just trying to show off your hat. We know.
Well, I'm excited about it.
But we are really excited about the Grass Valley platform. So that press release went out this morning. That's something we've been looking forward to for quite some time. So check that out. The case studies on the website, of course. Connect, Pearl, all those things on the website. We will see you in the next episode. Last note, next week we have a webinar all about Pearl Nano. So if that's your thing, if Pearl Nano is a thing you're interested in, maybe you have one or you're thinking about one, join us next Wednesday for a webinar deep dive all about Pearl Nano. I'll be here talking about all that fun stuff. So we'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.